Egypt's President El-Sisi voices concern over Iran-Israel tensions in call with Bahrain's king. Erdogan says Israel's attacks on Iran aim to derail U.S. nuclear talks. And President Putin says Russia sees no evidence Iran seeks nuclear arms. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi voiced alarm over rising Iran-Israel tensions in a call with Bahrain's king, urging calm and dialogue to prevent a regional escalation. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Bahrain's king Hamad bin Isa discussed growing instability in the region during a phone call. Both leaders expressed concern that the Israel-Iran conflict could widen with grave consequences for the Middle East. They urged all sides to exercise restraint and pursue peaceful solutions. The two also called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and stressed the urgent need to deliver humanitarian aid to civilians trapped by the violence. A new wave of missiles from Iran have struck Israel and the Israeli-occupied West Bank, marking the ninth day of escalating air attacks between the two nations. The Israeli occupation forces reported that sirens were activated across various regions as they worked to intercept the incoming strikes. The missile launches were visible from multiple areas in the West Bank. This conflict began on June 13th when Israel targeted Iran, raising alarms in a region already tense due to Israel's ongoing war in Gaza. Israel, believed to possess nuclear weapons, aims to prevent Iran from developing its own, while Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that negotiations with the United States are impossible while Israeli attacks continue. That comes as foreign ministers of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation convened in Istanbul. Araghchi emphasized that he cannot engage in talks with the U.S. while Iranian citizens face bombardment, which he claims is supported by the U.S. His comments followed U.S. President Donald Trump's suggestion of potentially supporting a ceasefire in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran. Araghchi accused the U.S. of being involved in the conflict since its inception, contradicting their claims of neutrality. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has accused Israel of deliberately undermining diplomatic efforts in the Middle East. Speaking at a summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Istanbul, President Erdogan said Israel's recent strikes on Iran were designed to derail upcoming nuclear negotiations between Tehran and Washington. He urged major powers to resist what he described as Israel's poison and instead push for dialogue to resolve the crisis. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan echoed the warning, stating that Israel's actions risk triggering a total disaster in the region and called on global powers to step in and prevent a wider conflict. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that he spoke with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and they agreed to expedite negotiations between European powers and Iran regarding its disputed nuclear program. Macron emphasized his firm stance that Iran must never obtain nuclear weapons, urging Iran to assure that its intentions remain peaceful. He expressed confidence that a viable path exists to end the conflict and prevent even greater threats. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow has repeatedly told Israel there is no evidence Iran is pursuing nuclear arms. He stressed Iran's right to a peaceful nuclear program. President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed that Russia and the International Atomic Energy Agency have found no proof Iran is developing nuclear weapons. He underlined Iran's right to advance its peaceful nuclear program under international law. Putin added that Moscow is sharing proposals with both Iran and Israel to help reduce violence and avoid further escalation. At the emergency UN Security Council meeting, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and IAEA chief urgently called for diplomatic solutions to the Iranian crisis, while Iran's representative Amir Saeed Ervani condemned Israel's actions as war crimes and warned against U.S. involvement. Israel's representative affirmed continued strikes against Iran, emphasized the severe of nuclear contamination from attacks on Iranian facilities. Guterres dramatically characterized the situation as racing towards crisis, warning of uncontrollable escalation. Multiple nations echoed these concerns, advocating for immediate de-escalation and diplomatic resolution. UN Under-Secretary General Melissa Fleming has urged Israel and Iran to engage in dialogue, emphasizing the need to avoid another war. She reaffirmed the Secretary General's commitment to a political resolution regarding Iran's nuclear issue, advocating for negotiations through the IAEA. Fleming also expressed a deep concern over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, highlighting the urgent need for aid access and the risks faced by humanitarian workers. She warned that the ongoing violence could lead to a broader conflict, stressing the necessity of stopping the escalation. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a key international pact aiming to stop nuclear weapons from spreading and promote global peace and stability. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark in our newsroom.
Thank you, Selma. Yes, we are now joined from Cairo by Al Ahram newspaper managing editor Ashraf Al Ashri, who's joining us here on Qnews. Thanks for being there with us. So we've heard about this call between President Sisi of Egypt and the King of Bahrain. How significant do we think these efforts by Egypt and Bahrain are in advancing a regional ceasefire initiative?
To you and to your dear viewers, such phone calls come in the framework of the joint coordination between Egypt and the Kingdom of Bahrain, and also and a continued coordination for the sickness of the Arab issues. Hence, the President Sisi and the King of Bahrain have already offered the effort with respect to the conflicts between Iran and Israel, situation in Gaza, and the answer or the brutal campaign by the Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinian people. President al-Sisi and bin Hamad have already offered the necessity of the necessity of the de-escalation and also to have sorting out the conflicts through the negotiations and escalating the effect between Egypt and Kingdom of Bahrain along with the Arab countries to escalate the process of a ceasefire and to resuming of the negotiation table. Particularly the Israeli campaign that started in the 13th of June. So, through such a coordination and a consensus and an agreement will be anticipated in order to escalate the pace of the negotiations in order to avoid a great regional war that might happen due to the escalations in the region. Egypt is represented as the main pillar of the solving out the conflicts in the region, particularly the Israeli war against the Palestinian people, along with the Israeli world campaign against Iran, and through which it had to deal with the European countries, along with the US and Russia, in light of advancement in Arab negotiations and initiatives.
Okay, and let me ask you, what do you think the implications are of Iran's missile strikes now reaching the West Bank? Might this create a shift in the nature of Israel's military response?
Along with the continuation of violence by Israel 24 hours and targeting some militarily Iranian sites and some strategic sites that is related to the transportation of fuel and gas, that will have some sort of an violent retaliation by Iran, as happened in the previous days. Hence, Iran is diversifying the types of the projectiles to be intensified in the hours to come. Hence, Iran is sending a message to the Israeli people: as long as the Israeli military operations will be confronted by a strong retaliation that targeting some sites within Israel in a bid to mobilize the public against Benjamin Netanyahu's government to stop the escalation. In light of trading strikes that would expected to continue within the upcoming weeks, unless we have an American pressure against Israel to stop the military operations.
Okay, well, let me talk to you about diplomacy, because France and Russia are attempting to revive diplomatic efforts and nuclear negotiations. Do these stand any chance of taking place whilst Israel is still attacking Iran?
Absolutely. Efforts by the E3 European countries and that during the foreign ministers meeting with the foreign ministers of the E3 European countries, along with the foreign minister of the Iranian Republic of Islamic Republic. So, in order to resume the nuclear negotiations, but in return, as cited by the President Trump, that Iran isn't prepared to do negotiations by setting a deadline in the upcoming days for convincing Iran to the possible resumption and submit of some of the American demands regarding the establishment of the nuclear facilities. Iran is affirming that it is very much prepared to continue the negotiation talks along with a meeting with the Iranian foreign minister with the Islamic countries in order to push forward back to the negotiation table. But this was also provided to the pause or the halt of the military operations against Iran. As the European control isn't that strong, and the only influencer that would impact the process is the U.S. role against practicing pressure against Israel. And so the ball now is in the court of the United States in order to resume the negotiation firstly.
Okay, and you mentioned the E3 there, of course, for viewers. That's France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, and they were having a meeting yesterday in Geneva with the foreign minister of Iran. But what about regional actors like Egypt, like Turkey? Could they have an effect on what the United States does next?
Absolutely. The Turkish Egyptian stance, along with the Gulf countries, of having good ties with the US, that they may play a very substantive role with the United States in order to pave the way for the diplomatic effort and the resume negotiation. Egypt and Turkey has a very great regional and historical ways in the region, along with their ties with Trump. I mean, the Gulf countries. These countries, the Gulf countries, and along with Egypt and Turkey, they will represent the cornerstone in ending the conflict and to convince the American party to give an opportunity for the resumption of negotiations and try to convince Israel not to target the nuclear facilities in Iran, that in a bid to avoid any expansion of the war.
Well, let's keep an eye on that and watch closely what will happen in the coming days and weeks. Ashraf Al-Ashri is the Al Ahram newspaper's managing editor, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much indeed. And it's back to you, Selma, in the studio.
Thank you, Mark, for conducting this analysis. Iran says operations at Tehran refinery are unaffected despite Israeli strike claims. Iran's oil refining and distribution company confirmed Thursday that the Tehran refinery remains fully operational, denying reports of damage following Israeli claims of a strike. The company said smoke seen in the area was from fuel residue burning after an earlier fire. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it had intercepted and destroyed 2 drones near the facility. Oil shipping costs through the Strait of Hormuz have risen sharply amid regional tensions. Oil transport costs through the Strait of Hormuz have surged by 54% since the start of the Iran-Israel conflict, according to economic reports. The increase is attributed to heightened security risks, rising insurance premiums for vessels passing through the strategic waterway, and fears of supply disruptions. Israel targets Hezbollah site hours after drone strike kills a Lebanese citizen. Israel's military confirmed it struck a Hezbollah position in southern Lebanon. The strike came hours after an Israeli drone attack killed a Lebanese man in Bint Jbeil district. Local media reported 2 drone raids targeted the town, hitting a motorcycle and killing its rider. The military also intercepted a suicide drone launched from Lebanon. And now for the latest developments in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes kill 5 Palestinians in southern Gaza, including aid seekers. 5 Palestinians were killed in Israeli strikes on southern Gaza, including 3 waiting for aid west of Rafah, according to our correspondent. Israeli warplanes also hit targets in Gaza City and artillery shelled northern Qnews. Heavy bombardment was reported in Shaja'iyya, Tufah, and Jabalia in the north of the Strip. Israeli gunfire has killed 21 Palestinians in Gaza today, including civilians waiting for aid. At least 21 Palestinians were killed and dozens wounded across the Gaza Strip on Saturday amid continued Israeli attacks. According to Gaza's health authorities, 11 of the victims were civilians waiting to receive humanitarian aid. 6 shot west of Rafah, while 5 others were killed in central Gaza near the Al Shuhada junction in Nusayrat. Medical sources say dozens remain in critical condition as hospitals struggle to cope with the influx of casualties. The total death toll in Gaza today has now risen to at least 48. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen as Israeli strikes intensify across the enclave. At least 202 Palestinians have been killed and over 1,000 others injured in the last 48 hours alone, according to medical sources in Gaza. The latest surge in violence comes as part of what Palestinian officials describe as a continued campaign of genocide. Since the start of in October 2023, local health authorities report a total of 55,908 Palestinians killed and more than 131,000 wounded. The vast majority of the casualties are women and children. The European Union's diplomatic service has raised serious concerns over Israel's conduct in Gaza. A confidential European Union report cited by international media states there are credible indications that Israel may be violating its human rights obligations under Article 2 of the European Union-Israel Association Agreement. The report is based on verified evidence and assessments by independent international institutions. The warning comes as humanitarian conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate, drawing increasing scrutiny from European governments over Israel's ongoing military campaign. Turkey's president has issued one of his strongest condemnations yet of Israel's war in Gaza. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has described the humanitarian crisis in Gaza as worse than conditions in Nazi concentration camps. Speaking at the 51st session of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Istanbul, Erdogan said 2 million Palestinians have endured inhumane suffering for nearly 2 years. He added that more than 55,000 people have been killed in Israeli attacks on Gaza, with women and children making up over 65% of the victims. Erdogan called for urgent action and said Turkey is pushing for coercive measures against Israel under international law and the UN Charter. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what I've been covering. Egypt's President El-Sisi voices concern over Iran-Israel tensions and call with Bahrain's king. Erdogan says Israel's attacks on Iran aim to derail U.S. nuclear talks. And President Putin says Russia sees no evidence Iran seeks nuclear arms. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.